Jake Paul's California mansion has been raided by the FBI, multiple news organizations report. You can see in this aerial footage agents in uniform outside his home in Calabasas.
When a name like Anthony Joshua enters the conversation, it stops being about a single fight. It becomes an idea about what happens when the safety rails come off, when controlled environments disappear and a fighter steps in with someone who cannot be negotiated with, scripted around, or protected by clauses. Because at the elite level, there are no filters, there are no edits, there are no narratives. There is only reality, and reality exposes gaps that marketing can hide for a while, but never forever.
Paul's attorney says he was out of state and not at his Calabasas home during that raid today. The FBI says they're investigating allegations of criminal acts for an incident that he's known for being in the public eye. But today, YouTube star Jake Paul is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
The volatility of this story is exactly what keeps people locked in. Every accusation sparks another clip. Every clip fuels another interview. Every interview triggers another denial and another breakdown. IT becomes a feedback loop where doubt turns into entertainment and controversy itself becomes the product. Attention, engagement, outrage, speculation, all endlessly recycled across MMA and boxing media. From a pure AVD standpoint, this narrative is engineered to work. IT blends fear, scandal, authority figures, and unanswered questions into one addictive current. It keeps pulling the audience forward with a simple promise. The next reveal might finally confirm everything they already believe or completely shatter the story they thought they understood.
Right, because of the weight difference in there. I only know one man that'll do the weight difference like that, and that's the Bronze Bomber. For me, in my opinion, I think it's scripted a little bit because, of the weight difference, and, Joshua is a former, champion. And also, he's current, he's active, and this is going to be the first time that we see Paul, fighting an active fighter. We seen the Mike Tyson, that was all fun, that was cute, It's fun and games and stuff, but now you're dealing with a real professional.
At its core, this isn't just about Jake Paul as an individual, it's about a deeper cultural clash between traditional combat sports values and the influencer era model, where control, virality, and optics often overpower the brutal honesty that once defined fighting at the highest level. Whether Jake Paul ever truly escapes this credibility cloud won't be decided by speeches, excuses, or clapbacks. It will be decided by choices. If future fights prioritize real risk over safety nets, transparency over narrative control, and true competition over spectacle, perception can change. But if the same patterns repeat, the audience will reach its own verdict that the illusion once cracked was never truly real.
Couple of hours, there's been some reports about an apparent leaked script. Have you seen this?
Move on. If people think that he's going to do a quick two-step and do this, and this, I hope he just goes out and takes his head clean off with the first punch and lets him know who Tommy Fury actually is. There's one interview, and I'm going to name it now, Lyndon Arthur, absolute fantastic, that man. I don't read that much on social media because it's all bullshit, but Lyndon Arthur, thank you very much. From me to you, you said something about Tommy being a proper fighter, can really punch, one of the hardest punches he's been in. Now, for Lyndon Arthur to go and say that, Lyndon Arthur's a proper hard, tough man. We all know that. So Lyndon, respect.
The moment the conversation around Jake Paul truly shifted wasn't defined by a single punch or a single night. It was the collective realization spreading quietly through boxing and MMA communities that spectacle, branding, and selective matchmaking had slowly begun replacing competitive purity. And once names like Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, Oscar de la Hoya, Dana White, and Michael Bisping entered the conversation, everything changed. Jake Paul stopped being viewed simply as a fighter. He became a symbol of an engineered era where narratives are marketed harder than merit, where optics outweigh opposition, and where promotion sometimes matters more than proof.
At any point, did you start to take your foot off the gas just a little bit because you noticed he was tiring out?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely a bit. I wanted to give the fans a show, but I didn't want to hurt someone that didn't need to be hurt.
Did you carry Mike?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, there was a point where I was just like, okay, he's not really engaging back. And so I don't know if he's tired or whatever. And I could just tell, his age was showing a little bit. And I just have so much respect for him. And that like violence war thing between us, like after he slapped me, I wanted to, be aggressive and take him down and knock him out and all that stuff. But that kind of went away as the rounds went on.
In the post-fight press conference,
in combat sports history, real reckonings are rarely clean or cinematic. They live in grey zones where public perception, whispered skepticism, and years of online debate collide. And that is exactly where the Jake Paul narrative now exists. Because his rise was never just about wins and losses. It was about how those wins were packaged, explained, defended, and amplified until fans started asking a dangerous question: are we watching real competition, or content dressed up as combat? The accusations of rigged or manufactured fights didn't appear out of nowhere. Respected fighters like Deontay Wilder openly questioned the legitimacy of Paul's bouts. Oscar de la Hoya echoed what many insiders had quietly believed for years. And even casual viewers began noticing repeating patterns: glove sizes, shortened rounds, selective opponent choices, and tight promotional control elements that felt less like unforgiving professional boxing and more like carefully produced exhibitions. Not illegal, not proven, but unsettling. And once doubt enters a fight culture built on brutality and honesty, it doesn't fade quietly, it lingers, it multiplies. And eventually, it defines the conversation.
Are you on performance-enhancing drugs?
If taking Viagra counts, then yes.
I'm gonna need a yes or a no.
No.
It's true.
Lucky you.
Dr. Stuart Fisher, author of Little Book of Big Medical Emergencies.
The narrative didn't just evolve, it ignited when Jake Paul himself admitted to easing off in certain moments on its own. That could sound like restraint, sportsmanship, control. But inside elite boxing, that admission lands very differently, because you are not supposed to manage danger for your opponent. You are supposed to finish the job. And once that clip began circulating, it poured gasoline on the doubt. It reinforced a growing belief that some of Paul's fights weren't resolved by competitive necessity. They were paced for optics, stretched for cameras, calibrated for spectacle. Then came the next accelerant: drug testing. Dana White's public challenge wasn't gossip. It was a demand, a call for transparency from someone who questioned whether Paul's claims of legitimacy were being matched by verifiable standards. And the silence that followed became its own story. The absence of publicly released, independently verified test results created a vacuum, and in that vacuum, speculation multiplied. Visible physical changes, prior resistance to strict anti-doping clauses, and insider commentary fused into a narrative that refused to die. Not because it was proven, but because it was never put to rest. And in fight culture, unanswered questions don't fade, they define reputations.
We stated that I use cocaine. I do not. So I told you could randomly cocaine test me for the next 10 years. I believe that you're a cheater, and I believe that you use steroids. So I want to randomly steroid test you for the next 2 years. And that thing that you came out with today, nobody on earth thinks that you really wrote that. You're too stupid.
He went public. I do not use cocaine, he said. So I told you randomly test me for cocaine for the next 10 years. I believe you're the cheater. I believe you use steroids. So now I want you randomly steroid tested for the next 2. Then he crossed the line that lit the use, and that statement you released today? Nobody on earth thinks you actually wrote that. You're too stupid. From that moment on, the tone changed. Medical professionals weighed in. Social media tore the clip apart frame by frame. Commentary from figures like Dylan Dennis poured fuel on an already growing fire. Not because accusations alone prove anything, but because the pileup of voices created a new atmosphere. One where denial started to sound weaker than disclosure. And then came the silence: no independently published test results, no neutral verification. Just more statements. And fight culture, silence doesn't feel neutral, it feels loaded. Every refusal to release documentation became, in the eyes of fans, another unanswered question stacked onto an already crowded ledger. MVP executives answered with legal language. Defamation warnings. Corporate shields. standard business moves. But in combat sports, threatening lawsuits doesn't build trust, transparency does. Legal pressure doesn't reassure fans that outcomes are organic. IT signals that image protection has become the priority over open accountability, and once fans believe the brand matters more than the bout, the damage goes far beyond reputation. It becomes structural.
Brought it up, wants to do testing. He wants to do a set date before the fight. Okay, so he did the cycle, he did whatever, and now he's going to try to take a piss test and clear it and be like, oh, I'm clean. That doesn't count. Okay, it doesn't count. With the money that he has, you can have a doctor clean your system in over 24 hours. Cheeto Vera just went on that podcast and said, you know that. So him doing this is another scam that he does. He's a bullshit artist. He just lies. Everybody knows he's on juice. He's admitted taking peptides. There's doctors that have him in the office saying we're giving him peptides on their website. So like, it's just bullshit. And I don't even care about the steroids thing. It's just like, what are we doing here? He has every advantage. He gets to pick the refs. He gets to pick the fucking judge. It's like, come on.
Dylan Dennis, who had his own contentious history with Jake Paul, posted photos of
Michael Bisping's criticism cut deeper because it wasn't loud, it was experienced. He calmly pointed out the pattern. Jake Paul's opponents were almost always retired, aging, or celebrity adjacent. Safe names, controlled risks, familiar optics, and then there was the one real test. The lone fight against a true peer-level boxer, Tommy Fury, ended in defeat. That single result now anchors much of the skepticism surrounding Paul's legitimacy. Because in elite combat sports, credibility isn't built on spectacle or selective matchmaking. It's built by repeatedly facing prime, hungry professionals, the kind of opponents who can't be managed, curated, or protected against. And until that happens, the questions don't fade, they compound.
There has never once in Jake Paul's career been any talk of that sort, of anything to do with the fight being anything but a real fight that has exactly the same situation as any professional fight. And that's exactly the same thing here for the Anthony Joshua fight. It's just beyond mind-blowing that people would think that. Anthony Joshua was on record saying that if he didn't finish him in the first round, that would be disappointing, that it would be a failure. The narrative changed as we got closer to fight night and obviously post-fight, and I understand why, but they were pretty adamant it would take max 2 rounds to knock out Jake Paul.
The FBI raid narrative added another dangerous layer to public perception. Because even when charges are dropped or investigations fade, repeated proximity to controversy leaves a stain that doesn't own fight culture where reputation matters as much as record. Every headline compounds the same impression. Wherever spectacle is being monetised, chaos seems to follow Jake Paul.
In the public eye, but today, YouTube star Jake Paul is making headlines after an FBI raid at his home in Calabasas. Sky 5 was over the scene Wednesday morning as federal agents entered Paul's home in a gated community off Mulholland Highway. 24 feds, some in tactical gear, could be seen carrying evidence from the property, including several firearms. After the search, a SWAT team was seen leaving in a procession of law enforcement vehicles.
Speaker One's argument is not that every fight was fake or every accusation true, it's that the structure surrounding Jake Paul's boxing career appears carefully engineered. From opponent selection to promotional framing, the environment feels designed to manufacture belief without providing the evidence that traditionally earns it. The legal process may drag on. But for Anthony Joshua, healing does not move on court timelines. Grief has no schedule. Even if justice is pursued, no ruling can rewind the moment when everything changed. Gerald Miller's emotional reaction adds another layer, proof that rivalry dissolves when mortality enters the room. Tragedy reminds people that competition is temporary, but empathy is instinctive when loss becomes undeniable. Fans are now forced to confront their own role. Clicks, outrage, and speculation fuel narratives that can deepen real pain. Voices like Johnny Nelson urge a pause, a reminder that behind every update is a human being trying to survive something unimaginable. Anthony Joshua's boxing future will always be debated. But his future as a man carrying loss matters more. Whether he fights again or not, this chapter will shape how he approaches life, relationships, and responsibility far beyond the ring. The broader lesson for combat sports is uncomfortable but necessary. If the culture continues rewarding recklessness without reflection, more lives will be caught in the fallout. Eddie Hearn and Tyson Fury are trying to pull the conversation back toward accountability. This story is not about choosing heroes and villains, it is about recognizing consequences. When lives are lost and trauma remains, the only meaningful response is honesty, restraint, and learning. Whether boxing listens may determine whether tragedies like this remain rare or become routine. What lingers most around Anthony Joshua is not the lawsuits or the headlines, but the silence after tragedy. When the noise fades and cameras turn away, a man is left replaying moments he cannot change. No advice from Eddie Hearn and no sympathy from Tyson Fury can prepare him for the long nights when memory becomes the loudest opponent he has ever faced. It is easy for fans to reduce this to sides Joshua versus Jake Paul like a fight prediction. But real life does not run on scorecards. Johnny Nelson continues to remind the public that grief does not care about internet debates, because the loss of RF Synagogami and Kevin Latif Shah's Ayadeli is permanent and indifferent to opinion. From a human angle, Eddie Hearn's posture feels less like management and more like guardianship. When someone you've worked beside for years nearly loses everything in seconds, professionalism turns protective. Tyson Fury's response resonates because he understands chaos, how fast narratives flip from triumph to disaster. His words feel like a warning to the entire fight community. The bravado they sell can never replace the fragility they live with. The voices of Duke McKenzie and Johnny Nelson matter because they come from experience, not hype. Their criticism of Jake Paul feels rooted in concern for a sport being pulled between legacy and spectacle and the danger of leaving real people exposed to consequences they never signed up for. Anthony Joshua surviving from the backseat is a detail that carries unbearable weight. Survival can feel like punishment when it comes paired with loss. That knowledge alone can reshape identity, turning confidence into caution and ambition into reflection overnight. For Jake Paul, this may become a defining moment not because of court outcomes, but because perception hardens fast. Once a name becomes associated with recklessness and tragedy, reversing that image demands humility and accountability that fame does not naturally teach. What unsettles fans most is how quickly celebration became mourning. One moment Joshua was dominating headlines for athletic reasons, the next he was fighting for emotional survival, revealing just how thin the line is between victory and devastation in elite sport. Carl Frocker's frustration echoes a broader exhaustion inside boxing, a sport caught between legacy and spectacle. And this incident forces an uncomfortable question: how far can entertainment go before it collides with reality in irreversible ways?